What's the worst financial decision you've seen someone make? Put everything in his girlfriend's name to hide assets. As he owed the IRS, the girlfriend sold his business, cashed out his accounts and ran. My former sister-in-law had a thriving medical practice. She was so stressed that she joined the Scientologist and started taking their classes. She opened up 5-6 credit cards without telling my brother, maxed the cards out with hundreds of thousands in cash withdrawals, and gave it to that cult. I bought a Hellcat when my old badass Challenger was paid off. Apply for a 5K loan. Didn't accept quick enough, so applied for another 5,000 loan. Both got accepted and ended up gambling it all. My roommate buys DoorDash almost every day. They'll maybe cook for themselves once or twice a week, but other than that, they order food in 5 to 6 times a week. I know how much they make, and I have not a clue how they can afford that. A guy I dated for a short time had been joining a MLM scheme, selling insurances. I listened to his monologue and told him I had no money. He was furious and tried to sell insurance to our waiter at the restaurant. He failed again. I'm still laughing today. He was no good guy. People who become involved in MLMs are so unbearable. I tell them up front it's a bad idea, get out, and don't expect a single sale from me. I will not perpetuate that scam, but we are still friends otherwise. Usually works out fine. But one time one woman friend invited us to dinner without telling us it was an MLM pitch. We find out after we almost finish eating, and I say bluntly, "No, I told you not to do this." Her and her other friends' retort was, "Why did you eat the food then? You lied to us, you nincompoops. You're just mad." I feel absolutely no shame or anxiety saying no. Lol. My brother's ex fell for a Craigslist scam. She found a motorcycle and the guy needed money up front to pay bills before she even saw it. We told her don't do it, it's a scam. She said she already sent $1,000. Of course he was never available to show her the bike, and we found out from my brother after they broke up she actually continued sending him money in hopes of getting the motorcycle. I think she was out $3,000 by the end. My ex-husband got cheated out of tens of thousands of dollars just by being an overtrusting and underthinking seller. He had always wanted a piano his entire life, and one day a friend's father had passed and left them an incredibly amazing and very old piano that she had no use for, so gifted to him. He loved those things so much, tuned it and fixed it up. Then a giant ball of tragedy struck that put us in very bad financial situation, causing us to no longer afford where we were currently living and having to move to his family's old home, which is off the mainland and on an island, being that the only way to get anything moved was by ship and extremely expensive. He had to sell a lot of things, and much to his dismay, the piano was just too big and too heavy to afford to ship there, so he put out a listing to sell it for a very reasonable price. It was an antique, in spectacular condition, made in the early 1900s, and was worth, at the very least, $80,000. He listed it for a fraction of what it was worth due to time constraints on having to get rid of it. Before the move, someone contacted him and offered to buy it. And here is where he did something monumentally stupid. The buyer offered to have a truck come and pick up the piano in a very quick time frame and asked if it would be alright to give my husband $1,000 up front and then the rest in 2 weeks when they got paid. I know he was under a lot of stress, but damn, that was dumb. You do not let anyone walk away with an incredibly valuable item without it being paid in full, as I'm sure no one here is shocked by. The person never paid anything else on the piano and just disappeared. The money from that sale alone was pretty much all we were going to have to live off until he was able to secure a new job in the new location. Scammers are truly awful, and many people need to learn not to be so trusting. It's sad, but it's just how it is. My awful aunt was the trustee for my grandparents' estate. When they passed, she decided to sell their house to a random realtor who put a leaflet on the door. To the realtor, not with the realtor. It wasn't put on the market, and the aunt rejected a matching offer by me after I argued hard to actually list the house and have people bid on it. The realtor slapped a new coat of paint on it and sold it a couple of months later for literally $1 million more than she bought it for. My supervisor took out a loan against their 401k to pay their rent. Because their credit cards were maxed, 2 weeks later, they bought a brand new 60k Lincoln with basically nothing down. Because her daughter just had a baby and I need a bigger car for that, I sat down with a guy to help him figure things out. He had a fair amount of credit card debt, but nothing impossible. Just by consolidating it on a new card with 0% interest for even a year, he would have seen amazing progress. Seemed like he had taken my advice. Next I saw him, it turned out he paid it off using his 401k. A friend of mine who is very bad with money, and his girlfriend bought some sort of water filtration system from a door-to-door salesman. He has to pay something like $300 a month for this filtration system. He was all stoked because it came with a free set of pots and pans. Fast forward a year and his girlfriend has broken up with him, moved out of the house, and he's had to sell his home because he can't afford to live there. The water filtration system is now sitting in a storage unit where he still pays $300 a month for it because he's on a 2 or 3 year contract. Sorry, the details are fuzzy. We have great water quality in my area. My dad had his own company and someone told him it made financial sense that instead of paying himself wages, he should take out a loan from his company. He built up debt for 3 years while working full-time rather than paying himself. It had all sorts of bad tax effects, like he was required to pay interest on this, which was then taxed as profit of the company. Then he paid himself again paying income taxes. It took him about 10 years to get out of that hole. Then he needed to sell his house because it was too expensive. But the buyer got cold feet on the last day before the sale. Rather than having the buyer pay 10% of the price to get out of the sale, he gave him an extension without an end date. The buyer then took 2 years to think about whether he wanted the house. All the while, my parents needed to keep paying the mortgage and couldn't sell the house to anyone else because of the contract they had with that guy. Brought them close to bankruptcy. I've personally paid a couple of $100 a month to let them pay for the mortgage during that time. Ran up credit card debt requiring bankruptcy. Once they were able to build credit again 7 years later, they proceeded to run up a massive amount of debt again, but couldn't go bankrupt again. So they used debt consolidation. The debt didn't come from sudden expenses. They just needed to buy things to feel better. A guy in my fraternity got $30K for an undisclosed reason. I'm guessing a family death or something, and he bet it all on the Yankees winning 1 game. They lost. Extravagant weddings that end in divorce a year later. Someone makes the decision to have a baby to keep a relationship. They had neither a house nor job. To have a baby isn't cheap. I bought a BMW. Weird. I think that about people who buy Range Rovers. A dude who owned a small convenience store in our town spent like $20,000 on fidget spinners. He was posting for like a year begging people to buy them. He would lose his business, and his marriage was falling apart due to it. I've seen people turn down raises because they didn't understand how taxes worked. Knew someone who answered those scam emails, thinking they would get rich. Last I heard, he lost around $50,000, emptied out savings accounts and maxed out credit cards, left in debt and had to move back with ailing parents. Not a close to them at all, but more like a friend of a friend of a friend's cousin. This person just would not listen. Genuinely thought he was going to be a millionaire. They kept stringing him along until the bitter end, and then, poof. Biggest concern his friends had was him trying to milk his ailing parents for their last nickel and dime. Fortunately, he wised up and knew he'd been had. The last I heard of him was he had an hourly job somewhere and trying to get out of debt. This is why everyone should have played RunEscape in 2007. Get scammed for your virtual currency, folks, and learn your lesson. This older lady worked part-time in my kitchen. It was a fine dining, fast-paced environment. She would only work about 20 hours per week doing busy work, for example, peeling vegetables, washing produce, etc. Tasks I knew she could handle and wouldn't get overwhelmed. Unfortunately, her husband passed away and she requested a few months off. I totally understood and said take all the time you need. Let me know when you feel comfortable coming back to work, if at all. Take care, Barbara. 8 months later, she contacted me for a job. I was more than willing to have her back in my kitchen. I nonchalantly asked her how she was coping with her loss. She broke down in tears. She apparently got a $500,000 insurance payout from her husband's death. Within those 9 months, she attempted to open a restaurant and sink every dime into the establishment. It went out of business in 6 months. She was now broke as an elderly lady having to go back to work. Share the worst financial decision you've witnessed in the comments. Watch the next video, where we cover why children were expelled from school, running naked with burning backpacks, or using a fire extinguisher on the principal. It's wild. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe.